How can we use our store? Well, keep in mind that in the end here, I'm managing my meals, not my categories, because we have no action planned that would change anything there, but I'm managing my meals here. So one great task would be to go everywhere in our app where we are importing meals from the dummy data and get rid of that import and instead get the data out of our store, because the difference will be that we can later add logic to change the data in our store, whereas our dummy data will never change. So we should import data from our store so that we can thereafter add logic to manipulate that data. For example, to restrict the meals we're displaying. So where do we need the meals then? On the categories screen, we're not importing meals. We've got a couple of other imports we can actually get rid of, but that's just a side note. We're not importing meals. Categories can stay there because, again, we'll not have any logic that changes that, so we can move on. The category meals screen is a different story. There we are importing meals. And now the goal is to get rid of that import and get the meals out of the Redux store. The question, of course, is how do we do this? Again, the React Redux package helps us with that. From that React Redux package, we can import something. We can import a hook, the use selector hook. This allows us to select a slice of our state, of our globally managed state, and use it in this component. Now I'm using the hook here because that allows us to use this in a functional component. You also might be aware of another approach where you actually import the connect function and wrap your export with that and use map state to props, map dispatch to props. That's something you can use as well. It will absolutely work, but this is a bit leaner, so I will go with use selector here. With that added, now when we use our meals, we're not using them like this. Instead, now we can get them with the help of use selector. So to derive our displayed meals, what I'll do here is I'll create a new constant, available meals maybe, name is up to you, and use selector here like this, because this will retrieve me data out of the state and return it. So that's what I'll then store here in this constant, the returned value. And use selector takes a function that will be executed for us by React Redux, a function that gets the state as an argument. Automatically, React Redux, which executes the function for us, will provide the current state, the current Redux state to this function. And it then is able to return any data we want from that state, from that global store, from that global state. And I'm using these terms interchangeably here. So how can we retrieve data from that state here in the function body then? And I'm using the shortcut arrow notation here, where on the right side of the arrow, this is automatically returned if it's not wrapped in curly braces. Well, to get access to something from the state, we have to go back to the place where we create the store. There, I pass in a root reducer, which is created by combining all reducers. Again, we only have one, but I explained why I did this. Now there we have this key, meals, which is totally up to you. You could name this whatever you want. This gives this slice of our state, which is managed by this reducer, an identifier. And we can now use this identifier to get hold of that part of our state for which this reducer is responsible. So in the end, a state that will look like this initial state. So in category meals screen, here I access state.meals, or whatever you chose as an identifier in combined reducers. And then here I'll access filtered meals. Not meals, which I would also have there. We also have meals in here. But I want to respect any filters that are set. Right now we have no logic to set them, but that will change in the future. So here I want to get my filtered meals so that I always get the meals that I really should be able to display. The meals that respect the filters set up by the user. And now it's the available meals, which I want to filter even more here to find the meal for the category ID I selected, or the meals for the category I selected. With that, there is no more meals uppercase in this file. That's all just lowercase here. And we got rid of that import successfully. Now let's move on. In the favorites screen, we're also importing meals. And just as before, we should get rid of that. So let's do this. Instead, also just as before, I'll use selector from React Redux to get my meals from the store. And therefore here where I use meals, well, I will actually get my available meals with use selector. Again, this gives me a state, and I can access state.meals.filtered meals, but now actually here for the favorites, I don't want to respect any filters that were set, because in my opinion, it makes sense that when we want to view our favorites, we always see all favorites. You could, of course, have a different logic and go for the filtered meals, but I will use just meals here. So .meals might look strange. This selects the slice of our state, and then in this slice, this meals thing here accesses this meals property in our state slice. But of course, if you have a look at your reducer, this only partly makes sense, right? Because we have a favorite meals property here. And indeed we do. So actually, we don't need to filter our favorites like this anymore, and this was just a dummy filter anyways. It always took the meals with M1 and M2 as an ID. Instead, for our favorite meals, we can just get them by accessing here on our meals state slice favorite meals. So this property, because we will later manage the favorited meals in a separate array in our store. So that's even easier here. Very short code. So with that, we got rid of the meals import here as well. Let's move on to the filters screen. There is no meals import here. The meal detail screen on the other end has one. So here I want to get rid of it. And now here we'll need that other meals property, which I showed a second ago, because again, here we can use selector from React Redux to select our meals, because in here we now have our component here where we use our meals, and there I want to have an array with all meals because I'm trying to load a single meal by ID, and therefore my basis, my array in which I look for that ID, should of course be an array with all meals and not filtered, because I don't care about any set filters. Here I'm looking for a specific meal with a specific ID, and I want to get a full list of meals, and that's therefore where we will need this unfiltered meals list we're managing here. So therefore here, we can now get our available meals with use selector, and there again, we use state meals.meals now for real, and now we can use available meals here to find the meal with that ID. With that, we got rid of this import here as well. We can also remove the button import now that I see it, but we will actually have a problem. You might notice that in the header, I actually also try to find a meal from the meals array, and we removed that import. Now the problem also is here in the navigation options, we can't use the use selector hook because you can only use hooks inside of other hooks or inside of functional components, and this is neither of that. It's a normal function, not a functional component, and also not a hook. So we can't use selector in here, so that won't work. Now of course we could bring back the meals import, but that would be kind of cheap because in real applications you will sometimes have that situation where you need data from your Redux store in your navigation data. And therefore in the next lecture, we'll tackle this and make sure that we can also get access to this here.